Hello friends, Robin here from Cheese From Scratch, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make Colby cheese. Now this Colby cheese recipe, I'm not actually going to share the recipe because the recipe is in my new upcoming cheese making book, but I'm going to teach you guys how to make it. So when you do have that recipe, or if you're following another Colby cheese recipe, you're going to kind of understand what is going on in those steps. I'm going to be doing lots of teaching to do with how to make this type of cheese. Now the first step that I am doing is that I just put my milk in the pot. The biggest thing that I do when I am making cheese, and this is going to be the biggest needle mover in you being able to make really, really good cheese for your family, is making sure that you're using the freshest milk possible. So I know that not everybody can use fresh from the udder milk. That is what most of this pot is comprised of, milk that I milked out this morning from my milk cows, but I know that not everybody can do that. So if you do have to use milk that has been stored properly, just making sure that it hasn't been stored too long. So if you're using raw milk, you want to try and aim for 2 to 3 days old, no older than that, and that's going to help you make the best possible cheese. Now if it's pasteurized milk that you're working with, you can still make cheese, and you can go a little bit older because that bacteria that is naturally present in the raw milk has been killed off. So it's not like you're going to have this living creature in your fridge. That's what I like to think of raw milk. It's kind of this living creature in your fridge, and our job as cheese makers is easier when we come in and we've got a blank canvas that we can just start kind of manipulating and turning into the styles of cheeses that we want. Now the raw milk bacteria that are naturally present in raw milk, obviously those are very good bacteria, but they also like to feed on the same food that our cheese making starter cultures like to feed on. So that's why I prefer to use the freshest possible raw milk that I can, and if you can't use that, then using pasteurized milk will help you to make better cheese. Now the first step here is I've put my milk into the pot. As I said, I've got milk from this morning's milking, and I topped up the batch with a little bit of milk from last night's milking. The milk that I topped up from last night's milking, I skimmed the cream off first. So obviously the milk that I milked out this morning is full fat, you know, the cream has not risen, but I skimmed off the cream from last night. So this is like a mostly full whole milk, partially skimmed milk batch of cheese, and I often do that just so that I have cream to make butter and things like that. Else I just make too much cheese and we don't have any butter or ice cream. It's coming into summer, we need ice cream. My kids would be sad, my husband would be sad. Anyways, so I've got my milk into the pot. First step is I'm going to be warming it up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is really quick. This happens really quick when you have fresh milk in the pot, because it comes out of the cow at like 100 degrees. So by the time you get up to the barn, it's usually really close to 90. You might have to heat it for a few minutes. Because I added that cold milk in here, I'm just having to heat it a little bit longer. But while I'm doing this, I'm just going to do up my milk dishes, which I haven't done yet, and I'm just going to come back every once in a while and just give it a little stir. And now you can see that I am in my homestead kitchen. This is a very well-used area of the home as a mom of 2-3 kids and farmer and all the things. So I don't necessarily have this pristine, beautiful, super clean kitchen, but I do like to keep my cheese making equipment from getting contaminated from anything else in the kitchen. So what I do is I actually take a clean plate. There's one right there. Take a clean plate, and I'm just going to put all of my cheese making equipment on this plate. My thermometer, my measuring cups, all of those things, anything that's going to go into the cheese pot is going to go on this plate, and that's how I know that it is going to stay clean. Doesn't matter if a kid comes and makes a crumbed sandwich on the counter, this is going to stay clean, and so I'm not going to be putting any other things into my cheese pot. So I'm going to let that heat, I'm going to go do my milk dishes, and then I will be back in a few minutes. Alright, so we just reached 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's actually 91.8. I never sweat a few degrees in my cheese making. As long as it hasn't gone to a range where it's actually like killing my cultures or deactivating my rennet, which are very, very high ranges, you don't have to worry about it. A few degrees are not going to make or break your cheese. Okay, so we're at 91 degrees Fahrenheit. My aim was 90. Now we're going to be culturing our milk. Now in the book, I'm going to give you options for either culturing it with something called a freeze-dried mesophilic culture, or I'm going to give you options for culturing it with clabber culture, which is a natural raw milk starter culture that I make. I feed it every day just like how you feed a sourdough starter, and I keep it on my counter, use it for cheese making, but also use the discard for all sorts of different things in my kitchen. So I teach you guys how to make this clabber culture in the book, but today I'm just going to show you how to culture this milk with clabber. So I almost exclusively make my cheeses these days with clabber culture, versus back when I first started cheese making, I almost exclusively made it with freeze-dried, and both of them make really good cheeses. So the option is up to you, whatever is easiest for you, because sometimes kind of learning to care for something is just a whole different thing. You don't want to learn that right off the bat. You just want to have some freeze-dried cultures in the freezer that you can pull out, add in, and you're good to go. Alright, so first things first is I have to feed my clabber culture forward. So here's my clabber culture from yesterday. I'm going to just take a little bit of this and add it to new fresh milk today. So this is milk from this morning's milking. So this will feed this clabber culture forward. So tomorrow I will have clabber culture whether I want to make cheese or whatever I want to do. So just mix that in nicely. Once it's all combined, you can just put a loose lid on it, and this is going to sit on the counter until tomorrow, when it will look like this one. Now this stuff is my discard, and so I could either use it all throughout my kitchen for all sorts of different things, or I can use it in cheese making. So I use it to culture cheese at a ratio of 1/4 cup of clabber per gallon of milk. Today I have 6 gallons of milk in my cheese pot. All of the recipes in my cheese making book are actually 4-gallon recipes for any of these pressed cheese recipes, but they're easy to up or down depending on how much milk you have. So because I have 6 gallons of milk in the pot today, that means that I'm going to be using 1.5 cups of clabber culture. I like to just have them in like mason jars because it makes it easy to know how much clabber I have to add in. This pint jar is 2 cups, so I'm going to add in most of this and leaving back about 1/2 cup. To add this into my cheese pot, first thing what I do, this is not necessary but it does help prevent lumps. First thing what I do is I take a little bit of milk from my cheese pot. So this is nice warm milk straight from my cheese pot, and I pull it out, and then I add in my clabber culture, and I try not to add in the top layer. So the top layer is this cream layer here. It doesn't matter too much if it goes in there, but cream tends to ferment a little bit quicker than milk, so I try to, just use the bottom stuff, and that's going to help me with consistency as much as possible. So we're going to add some of that into this milk. We're going to add 1.5 cups in today. If I get a little bit of that cream in there, I don't care. Okay, go. And then we're just going to whisk that up best we can, just combine, and this is going to again help prevent lumps or anything. If you were going to be using the freeze-dried culture at this point, what you do is you just sprinkle it onto the surface of the milk, let it sit just on the surface of the milk for about 5 minutes, and then you incorporate it gently into the milk. So there's none of this, having to deal with milk kind of stuff with it. So 2 different ways to culture it, both work, both make really good cheese. Okay, so once I've got that well combined, I'm just going to add this into my cheese pot. So we're just going to add that in there, and we're just going to gently stir. Oops. There we go. No, that's okay. We're just going to gently stir that up. Now, this Colby recipe actually asks for what is called a ripening time, where we're going to put the lid on this pot and we are going to just let it sit for a little bit of time before we add in our rennet. And the purpose of this is just to allow that culture to start to work. Now, there's a bit of controversy of whether ripening times are actually necessary or not in the home cheese making setting. I do have some in some of my recipes, and others I don't have them in. And that just depends on what I think that, what has come out in testing, what cheeses taste better with ripening times and what don't. So Colby cheese is one that does have a ripening time, but I don't necessarily always do it. And it makes good cheeses whether you have the ripening time in or whether you don't. It does make a slightly different textured cheese. So it's a little bit drier if you don't have the ripening time in, or not drier, just like the paste of it is a little bit drier versus if you have that ripening time in. So it's your choice whether you have time to do it or not. Today, I'm not going to do it just because I don't have time for it, and I'm still going to be able to make really good cheese with this pot. So normally, I would put the lid on this pot, let it sit for half an hour or so, and then I would come back and add my rennet. Not going to do that today, so we're just going to go straight to adding in our rennet. Now, if you are using pasteurized milk, you're going to be wanting to add in something called calcium chloride before you add in that rennet, and this is going to aid in coagulation because during pasteurization, the calcium content in the milk is actually damaged. So you need to add that calcium back in to make sure that your milk coagulates properly. So all of those directions in the recipe in the book. All right, so rennet, the rule about rennet is you always need to dilute it before you add it into your pot. We all have different strengths of rennet. The book deals with double strength rennet, but if your rennet is a different strength, not a big deal. You can easily just go by the package directions on your rennet. So we're just going to add this into the water. You want to do this right before you're going to add it into the pot. You don't want the rennet to sit in the water for at all, because that will deactivate the rennet. So we're just going to put this into the pot over here. So I just add it in, and then just gentle up and down stirring motions. I try not to break the surface of the milk and just kind of do up and down, up and down, up and down stirring motions. And this will help to evenly distribute the milk without introducing too much air into the pot. And then I just hold my spoon kind of to the side when I'm done that. And this is going to stop the milk because that rennet is already working. It has already started working in there, and if the milk is still moving when it's working, you're going to have just like stranger curds. They're not, it's not going to be a make or break of your cheese, but you will notice that there's little air pockets in your curds when you go to stir them. It's not contamination or anything unless the curds are floating, not contamination. It's just that that rennet just started working when the milk was still moving. So we're going to put a lid on this pot now. I like to use tin foil as a lid for my pots because it helps retain the heat really good. The tin foil doesn't have to touch the food. It might actually touch a little bit today because I have so much milk in the pot, but it doesn't actually have to touch. It's just going to help you retain the heat by just sitting above the milk. And I just keep the same piece of tin foil as long as it doesn't touch the milk. You can just keep it, and just that can be your lid for your pot. This works way better than having an actual lid. Alright, so now we're going to set the timer for 1 hour. I'm going to come back in an hour, and we're going to check for something called a clean break. Alright, so it's been an hour. I just came over and pulled the tin foil off of my pot. It did touch my milk a little bit. I try not to let that happen, but my pot was a little bit full today, so it did touch a little bit. So I'm going to check for something called a clean break here. So what I do is I do a little slit down in my milk, just a tiny slit, and then I just put my knife underneath the split, and it should split into this nice clean split. No falling off pieces or anything like that. I know that is a nice clean break. There's multiple different ways that you can check for a clean break. You can also just stick your knife underneath your milk and just lift up to the side. Should have a nice little split there as well. So those are ways to check for a clean break. Now that I know my pot has a clean break, I'm going to cut these cubes into a grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my knife all the way as far as I can reach down. My knife's a little bit short for this pot, and I'm just going to go across the pot about 1 inch apart in these nice long kind of vertical streaks. And then once I do all the vertical ones, I'm going to go horizontally across this pot as well, this way, to make this checkerboard sort of pattern in my pot. So right now what this is they're basically 1 inch pillars that are extending all the way down to the base of the pot. So now I have this grid of curds is what it's called. These are those 1-inch pillars. I'm going to put the tin foil back over this and let it sit for 5 minutes, and then I'll come back and cut underneath to turn these pillars into smaller curds. Alright, so these have sat for 5 minutes. You can see they've sunk down a little bit below a layer of whey. So now I'm going to come along with my knife, or you can use a skimmer. A skimmer would be like this. A skimmer would be like this kind of thing, to go down underneath. I just like to use my knife because I've already got it dirty. And I'm going to work later on to get the curds to a more even size, so it doesn't really matter if I use a skimmer or not. I'm just going to do the best that I can to go down and cut these curds all to sort of even size. I'm going to flip my knife, do the same thing again, just kind of making these curds into 1-inch cubes as best as I can. And I'm not worried if I'm not going to get them all to that kind of size, because I will work on that after. Now again, lid on the pot for another 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and start stirring. I'm going to make myself an iced coffee because we're going to be stirring for about 45 minutes, and I like to just sit here, have my iced coffee, listen to a podcast, and just kind of enjoy stirring. So it's a little break in your day. Alright, so this is my current favorite iced coffee. Maple syrup on there, just over the ice. 2 shots of espresso. And a little bit of cream. Generous pinch of Redmonds, and then just a little bit of cinnamon. Alright, so I've got my iced coffee ready to go, sitting on a stool so I can have a little break. I've got a nice clean towel here just hanging on the stove, not a dirty one, because I'm going to be stirring with my hands today. And so if I need to dry my hands or go and help a kid or anything like that, I can just dry off and go on and not have to worry that I'm going to contaminate my cheese pot. So my hands are all sanitized, washed all the way up to my elbows. I've scrubbed my nails. I'm ready to go. You can just stir with a spoon if you'd like as well. It's up to you. I kind of like to stir with my hand just because it lets me feel what's going on in the cheese pot. So first thing when I start stirring a pot of curds, I'm just going to kind of be super gentle. I'm just going to be going to the bottom of the pot, finding any big curds, sort of breaking them apart. You can even take a butter knife and just cut them apart as you bring up any really big ones. And this first kind of 5 minutes of stirring is super, super gentle. And what we're doing during this first 5 minutes is just we're going to be taking any big curds that didn't get cut in that initial cutting, and we're going to be bringing them down to size. So I'm just going to do this over the next 5 minutes, and then I will start heating my curds up a little bit. When I was talking about the rennet still being moving when your milk starts to coagulate, when I was talking about when the milk is still moving when your rennet starts to coagulate, and I was talking about little air pockets, this is what I mean. So there's a few little air pockets in there, so that just means that the rennet was still, or the milk was still moving when the rennet kind of started activating and working. So not a big deal. Just something to be aware of. As I bring any big curds up, I just cut them down to size. Alright, so I've been stirring for about 5 minutes now. Most of the big chunks of curd have been kind of broken down into smaller pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my burner on to low. This is a very big pot, so it's going to take a while for this pot to jump from 90 degrees Fahrenheit up to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And I actually want it to take that whole 45 minutes of stirring, so 40 minutes now that I've been stirring, to get to that 105 degree Fahrenheit. I don't want to be heating too quickly, because that's going to form a skin on the curds, and it's just going to adversely affect texture and pressing of the cheese actually. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to gently stir it solidly for the next 40 minutes. Just if I notice that the temperature is increasing too much, I should put my temperature or my thermometer in here and I'll keep track of it. But if I notice that the temperature is increasing too much, I'm just going to turn the heat off for a little while, and I just really want to not hit that 105 degrees Fahrenheit until I'm at 40 minutes. And just making sure that you get the bottom of your pot. If you have it on direct heat, just being careful not to burn yourself because the bottom is hot. So you might need to use a spoon. So just going about, grabbing any big curds, breaking them down to size, any ones that you missed, and just gently stirring to keep it from clumping and keep those curds moving in the way. Alright, so I've been stirring these curds for about 40 minutes now, and so they've got quite a bit of firmness on them now. They're ready to go on to the next step. So when I squeeze them in my hands like this, what happens is I can run my finger over top of them and they're going to break off into individual curds. Like that. And another test I do to see is I take a curd that's kind of like the majority curd in the thing, and I push it down between my fingers, and it should push down like gum. It shouldn't shatter. If it shatters, it's not ready. For example, this curd right here, this is going to create a mechanical hole in my cheese. You can see it's a little bit more jellyish than the other ones, and when I push this one down, it kind of shatters. It's mostly skin. So there's a few curds like that in there, but most of the curds are this smaller sort of size. They're about the size of a navy bean. When you press them down between your fingers, they're just going to flatten and not shatter. And so that's how I know that it is ready to go on to the next step. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover my pot, and I've turned off the heat. We've reached 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to cover my pot, and I'm going to let these curds sit under the pot for 15 minutes. Alright, so it's been 15 minutes of these curds sitting underneath the whey. They are all sunk down to the bottom of this pot. Now there's two things that you can do here. So the recipe instructions, they get you to put a fine mesh strainer or your cheese form or something with holes in it into this pot, and then you're just going to scoop out of that pot so that you don't grab, or out of that form or strainer so you don't grab any curds. You've probably seen me do this on other videos that I have, but Colby curds, you can actually, because they have been stirred for so long, they're all settled down to the bottom of this pot right now. So what I can actually do, if I can physically lift this pot, which I can with this one, I can just dump off most of the whey. And what we're aiming to do here is we're aiming to take the whey off till we see the surface of the curd. So I'm not going to dump all of the whey out of this pot right now, but I'm going to dump a good amount of it. And if you can't lift your pot, just doing that dipping and scooping method, it is also a good way to do it. Alright, so when I am finished dumping, I just kind of bring the whey back up and make sure that I can see the surface of the curds, and then I know that I have taken enough. So you can see the surface of the curds there, so that is how I tell that I have taken enough. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace equal amounts of 105 degree Fahrenheit water. So that was 105 degree Fahrenheit whey that I just took out of, and now I'm going to put equal amounts of 105 degrees water. So I use my tap water for cheese making. I know it's really good quality, but if you ever have any question about if your tap water is good or not, then don't use it. Use water that is not chlorinated but has been distilled or boiled or anything like that. Alright, so I'm just going to turn on my 105 degree Fahrenheit water-ish. So you might want to be a little bit more exact with this. I just make this cheese a lot, so I just know what 105 degrees Fahrenheit water feels like. And we're just going to add it back in about equal amounts. I probably won't go quite as high, but about equal amount of that water. So we don't want the temperature to change much from that original 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And the purpose of this washing step is it's going to help us to have a more elastic, pasted type cheese. So a lot of cheeses that have that typical kind of elastic paste are washed curd cheeses. So for example, Goudas, Colbys, Havardis are all good examples of washed curd cheeses. And what we're actually doing during this stage is we are washing not any remaining, but some of the lactose away from the curds. So the lactose is the bacteria food in our cheese, so we're taking some of that lactose out. And so that's why the ripening time that I talked about a little bit at the beginning, why you're going to get different textured cheeses depending if you do a ripening time or not, just because that depends on how much lactose your bacteria is actually fed on between the point of you washing the curds and washing that lactose away versus if you hadn't. So you can see I'm at 104 degrees Fahrenheit here. This is just like the hottest tap water that I can get. I have a little bit of colder water in there, but it just, when it kind of mixes with the cooler curds, it lands at about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, so that's pretty close. 104.7. I'm going to shut that off so it's easier to deal with. I had a little bit of cold there. Alright, so now I'm going to stir these curds for 2 minutes. Keep that up. So 2 minutes of stirring these curds. And this is just going to distribute that water around. Alright, so I've finished stirring these curds for 2 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that lid, that tin foil, back on here and let them sit for another 15 minutes under this washing water. Alright, so it has been about 15 minutes now. So I'm going to take the lid off my cheese pot, and we're going to do the exact same thing of dumping the the weight off of the curds, but this time we're going to dump as much as we can off of it. And so you can see those curds on the bottom there. I'm just going to keep them on the bottom as best I can. They should stay pretty put. And I will leave a little bit of whey in there because I need it for wetting my cheesecloth. Alright, so we got a big curd mass in the bottom there. If you can't physically lift your pot, because they are heavy, you can just do that dipping method. So if you can't lift your pot. Alright, so this is what it looks like at the bottom of my pot right now. I have a clean cheesecloth, I have my clean cheese form, and I have this all in a dish, so that's going to keep any whey from getting up. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to take my cheesecloth and I'm going to dip it in the whey that's in the bottom of this pot. And this is a really important step in preventing any sticking cheesecloth. Alright, so once your cheesecloth is all wet, we'll squeeze it out. Oh, with Mama. Nice. So you're just going to put that in there and lay it as flat as you can. Ooh, fun. Alright, and now we're just going to take big chunks of this curd and we're just going to pack them into the cheese form. So you have to press pretty firmly. Just going to pack it in there. Alright, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get all these curds into here. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I made a bit too big of a batch for my cheese form here, but we'll see. So, in all of my recipes, and all of my pressed cheese recipes, what I recommend is once you put your curds into the form, you're just going to go around, pull up the edges of the form, and this is going to or the edges of the cheesecloth. This is going to get any wrinkles out. It's going to make a smoother rinded cheese for you. You're going to take a flap of the cheesecloth and put it over top. And then you're going to let this sit in this container right here for about 10 minutes before you put it in the press. And during this time, you can already see there's some whey in the bottom of this pan. During this time, whey is going to seep out, these curds are going to settle a little bit more, and it's going to help you not lock so much moisture in your cheese when you're pressing it. So we're just going to let these sit for 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and put this into the cheese press. Alright, so my cheese has been draining for about 10 minutes. You can see there's quite a bit of whey in the bottom there. So I always do this with my pressed cheeses, and as I said, it's just going to help you press your cheese better. Now I'm hoping that I don't get a bit of a lip on this Colby. You can see that I have a little bit too many curds in here, but not a big deal. I'll just have to cut it off if I do. So now we're going to put the follower cap
I can help
on
you
this.
with that. I can eat some of that.
Here, you can have some. Here. I am going to get a lip on the top, so you can have some.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want some more?
Hmm?
We still might get a lip. Alright, so top that up. Put our follower cap on. And now we're going to put it in the press. So you can see I have a Dutch style press. Lots of different types of presses you can have. They will all work. I have a video on picking out a press, as well as how to make a bucket press, and also the book talks about all of those things. So it gives you like step-by-step instructions on how to use your presses. So for example, this is a Dutch press, and there's examples in there on how to calculate weight and pressure and stuff with your Dutch press. I'm biased, but I think it is a very valuable resource. It's the book I wish I had when I started. Alright, so I'm going to get this on. So now that I've got it in the press, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply light pressure. Now, light pressure for this one would probably be, there's about 5 pounds in this jug of water that I have on here, and I'm going to put it to the very first notch on my Dutch press, which makes it about 10 pounds of pressure. And what I'm looking for is I don't want the whey to be running. So I actually see that some of the whey is running here. So you can see the whey is coming quite quickly out of there, so that means I'm applying too much pressure too quickly. So what I'm going to do is just kind of move it a little bit forward. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So over the next little bit, in the recipe it says start off light pressure, and then after half an hour you take your cheese out, you flip it over, redress it, it's called, put it back in the press and put it to medium pressure. I do that, but what I do is over the next half hour I gradually increase up to light pressure, and this is going to help you prevent mechanical holes from forming in your cheese. So like I'm just going to be hanging around the kitchen over the next half hour doing the dishes and stuff like that, and every once in a while I'm just going to move it up a little bit, and light pressure lands between 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. So if I go to my first notch, I'm going to be about 10 pounds. If I go to my second, I'll be about 15. So I'm just going to gradually work it up there, and just making sure that I'm checking that I'm not having whey running out. I just want it to be dripping out. Alright, so it has been about half an hour of pressing at light pressure. I'm going to move up to medium pressure, but first I have to redress this cheese. So I just take the lid off. It's starting to look like a cheese now. It's got some creases, so I know I definitely need to increase the pressure quite a bit. But it's starting to look like a cheese. Okay, so just flip her over, and I'm going to pull my cheesecloth up, stick her back into the cheese form. This is called redressing, this technique. And then I'm going to take all of the cheesecloth and stretch it out, and I'm going to do the same thing where I go around the cheesecloth and I kind of pull up on all the edges, and this is going to smooth out the wrinkles, and it's going to help you to form a smoother rind. And then again, I'm just going to take that one corner, flip it over the top, put my follower lid on, and this is going to go back in the press at medium pressure now, and it's going to be in the press for about 8 hours.
Can I play this?
Yeah, you can put it.
How do you play it?
You just put the letters on there. Alright, so medium pressure for my press is usually about the second notch, and I add an extra 5 pounds of weight here. Again, we don't want the whey to be running, we just want the whey to be dripping out. So I can see that it is just dripping It's not squeezing it out so fast, sealing off the edges. It's just gently dripping out. All right, so my cheese is in the press now. It's gonna sit in there for 8 hours. That medium pressure is gonna knit the rind together. And when I come back in 8 hours, it should look something like this. This is one that I actually made yesterday. So after 8 hours, you're going to put it into a saturated brine or a 20% brine. You can also have the option of surface salting it. So this one brined all night. I made it yesterday. Right before bed, I put it into the brine. It brined all night. Usually it's about 3 hours per pound of cheese that you want to have it in that saturated brine. And then I pulled it out and I put it into my drying container. So my last week YouTube video was actually all about how to set up a ripening container and control humidity in your aging area. But I also use these ripening containers as drying containers. And you can see there's a little bit of liquid in the bottom of this container. So what I do is I just put a mat or something to raise it up off of the surface of the container into there, and then I just put the lid kind of loosely ajar on there, and then this goes into my cheese cave. And I also have a video on how to set up a cheese cave. All of that stuff is also in the book, so you can find all of that information in there. And so this will just go into the cheese cave. It's going to dry for about 5 days. It usually takes 2 to 5 days for the cheese to be dry enough to vacuum seal. I'm just going to come back every day and flip it. You can go twice a day if you want to, but usually I'm not that dedicated. So every day, flip it over. If there's any moisture in the bottom of the container, I'm just going to wipe that out and keep it nice and dry. And then when it's dry to the touch or passes something called the paper towel test, where if you put a piece of paper towel down, you put the cheese on the paper towel, and then you pick up the cheese a little while later and there's no moisture on the paper towel, you know that it is ready to vacuum seal. So you can take this cheese and you can vacuum seal it, and then you can put it back into your cheese cave or your temperature controlled aging area, and it's going to sit there for about 6 weeks. And we like this cheese, this Colby cheese, at about 6 weeks old. That's our favorite, but you can go up to a year with it. It is like a nice mild cheddar when it's young, like 6 weeks, but then it becomes kind of sharper, like an older cheddar when you let it sit for longer or let it age for longer. Yeah, so this is one of our favorite cheeses. It's one of the first cheeses, our pressed cheeses, that I ended up making because my husband is from Wisconsin and he just has these really good memories of Colby cheese. So that's why it kind of became one of our family favorites. And I just make a lot of Colby cheese because it's a super simple cheese to kind of just make when you are in a lot of milk and you're having to preserve it. You just get, kind of in the groove of making Colby cheeses. Like yesterday I made one, today I made one, probably on Sunday I'm going to be home, so I'll probably make a big one on Sunday. And that's kind of how I just get into the groove of making one style of cheese over and over again. And then I'll do that for like a week, and then I'll make a different style of cheese over and over again, and just build up a bunch of cheeses in my cheese cave during the times that I have a lot of plentiful milk. So we have a lot of milk coming in right now, and so it's kind of a cheese making time for us right now. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you haven't already checked out pre-orders for my new book, I know I've talked about it a lot in this video, but you can check them out down below. There's also bonuses. So the thing about pre-ordering is you get bonuses. They went up this week for people who have already pre-ordered. Check your email, check your spam, because sometimes things like that land in there. And you can actually get a digital copy of the book before the actual book is printed. So the book's going to be printed on May 30th, shipped out on June 10th. And yeah, it's just been this labor of love writing this book. There's so much in it, and I really want to showcase over the next few videos just some of the stuff that is in the book, because there is so much information in there. I've really poured everything that I think that you guys need to know into this book. So that's why I'm so excited about it. That's why I'm talking about it so much, because it's just been this huge project, and I think it's going to make your life as a cheesemaker way simpler having this resource on your shelf. So thank you guys for watching my video. If you haven't already, subscribe down below, press like, come back next Monday because I post a new video every Monday and on all things cheese making, milk cows, and dairy processing, and I would love to have you guys along. Yeah, and have a good weekend. Or I guess, no wait, have a good week. I'm going to have a good weekend because I'm filming this on Friday. We'll see you on Monday. Okay, bye guys.